You are sinking. The last daylight is gone above your head, and the water pressing against you is not the cold of a winter lake or a mountain river. It is colder than that. The temperature reads -1.9 degrees Celsius, colder than the ice in your freezer at home, and yet somehow it is still liquid. A pale shape drifts past your shoulder. Slow, ghostly, wrong. Fish should not live here. Blood should not flow here. Hearts should not beat here. And somehow one is beating just past you. And somehow that is not the strangest part. Because the strangest part is what is holding the whole system together. Think about what you were just told. Water that is below the freezing point of fresh water, still moving as liquid, still full of animals, still deep enough that no light has touched it for hours of descent. Most people, when they hear the phrase, the coldest place in the ocean, picture ice. They picture the surface of Antarctica, penguins on a shelf, wind carving snow into knife edges, killer whales spy hopping through cracks, snow that has fallen and refrozen so many times that it has forgotten it was ever weather, cameras hovering over a white desert, documentaries with slow music. That is not the coldest place. That is just the ceiling. And the ceiling is the part everybody has already seen. The coldest place is underneath. It is a layer of near-freezing seawater that hugs the seafloor around Antarctica, and it stays liquid for two simple reasons. It is salty, and it is under enormous pressure. Salt lowers the freezing point. Pressure lowers it a little more. Together they cheat physics just enough to keep water from turning solid at temperatures that would ice over any pond on land. Scientists call the deepest, densest part of it Antarctic bottom water. That is not a very dramatic name. It sounds like a filing category. But hold on to it. It comes back later, and when it does, it stops being a temperature and starts being a machine that the entire planet is quietly running on. For now, feel it for a second. This is water that would kill almost anything you know. Drop a tropical fish into it, and its cells shatter as ice crystals grow inside its blood. Drop a human into it, and hypothermia sets in within minutes. Even most of the ocean's own inhabitants would fail here. A shallow water cod, a coral reef fish, a squid from a warmer basin, a jellyfish drifting down from above, all would be dead in less time than it takes to describe why. This is not a place life should exist, but it does. Something lives here, and it should not. So how does it manage? Start with the small silver fish drifting past you. It looks unremarkable. That is the point. It is unremarkable in a place where existence should be impossible. Look closer, and the miracle is not on the outside. It is inside its veins. In the 1960s, a marine biologist named Arthur de Vries figured out what makes Antarctic fish different. Their blood is full of proteins that grab onto ice crystals the moment those crystals begin to form. Antifreeze glycoproteins. Picture a bodyguard for every single fragment of ice inside your veins. Every time a crystal tries to grow into something big enough to slice a cell, one of these proteins latches on and stops it. The ice cannot expand. The fish does not freeze. It swims through water that should be turning its blood into a slush of tiny blades, and instead its blood just keeps moving, like nothing is wrong, like the temperature is a suggestion its body decided not to accept. That is a beautiful solution. But the ocean does not give solutions away for free. Those proteins only work in the cold. In warm water, they become useless. Worse, the entire body has been rebuilt around the assumption that the water will always be near freezing. Enzymes, muscles, membranes, heart rhythms, oxygen chemistry, all of it is calibrated for the deep freeze. This animal did not adapt to survive the cold. It adapted so that it can never leave it. Warm water would kill it faster than cold water ever could. The freezer is not just its home, it is its cage, and the door does not open in the other direction. Remember that. It matters later. When we start talking about what happens to a place that is quietly warming, this is the detail that will come back and hurt. Now widen your view. Below the small silver fish, below the drifting bodies, the whole ocean is doing something strange. Cold water is heavy. Salty water is heavy. When cold and salty meet at the edge of the Antarctic continent, where sea ice forms and pushes out the salt as it freezes, leaving behind water that is even saltier than what it started with, the resulting mixture becomes the densest natural water on Earth. It slides off the continental shelf like a slow avalanche. It disappears into the abyss. It hugs the seafloor, and it spreads, not fast, not violently, but relentlessly, in a slow crawl that scientists trace across ocean basins with dyes and instruments and years of patient measurement. Here is the thing about the deep ocean that almost nobody talks about at the surface. It has to breathe. Every creature down there, from the pale fish drifting past you to the invertebrates crawling across the mud thousands of meters below, needs oxygen. That oxygen has to come from somewhere. It comes from up here, and it gets delivered by the cold. When Antarctic water sinks, it drags dissolved oxygen down, with it into places sunlight has never reached. The coldest water on Earth is also the reason the deep ocean can breathe. That should sound impressive. Now remember that this delivery system depends on freezing being possible in the first place. If the Antarctic surface stops getting cold enough, if the sea ice does not form the way it always has, the pump slows. The cold is not just a temperature, it is a machine, and every animal you have not met yet in this video is downstream of it, including the ones that eat, breathe and grow thousands of kilometers from where the cold water first sank. And the animals riding that machine are stranger than any horror movie. Cut open the next fish that drifts past you. Its blood runs clear. Not pale red, not thin pink. Clear, like water with a slight yellow tint. This is not a trick of the light. This animal has no hemoglobin, no red blood cells, no red pigment carrying oxygen through its body at all. It is called an ice fish, in the family Channicthidae, and it is the only known vertebrate on Earth without red blood. Read that again. The only one. Every other backboned animal on the planet, from a hummingbird to a blue whale to the person watching this, uses hemoglobin to move oxygen. This fish gave that up. It walked away from a molecule that has been holding vertebrate biology together for hundreds of millions of years. How is it alive? Because cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water. A lot more. And because the ice fish rebuilt itself around that fact. Its skin has no scales, letting oxygen pass directly through into the body. Its gills are enormous. Its heart is up to 3 times larger than the heart of a comparable red-blooded fish, and it pumps huge volumes of thin, clear, oxygen-carrying plasma through wide blood vessels at a leisurely rate. It does not carry oxygen. It floods itself with oxygen. It gave up on efficiency and switched to abundance. You are looking at a creature that abandoned one of the most fundamental features of vertebrate biology and got away with it, not because it was clever, because the cold did the work. That is one of the most important sentences in this entire video. Cold water hands the ice fish so much free oxygen that the fish was allowed to lose a system every other backboned animal on the planet needs. The cost is that the system only works if the water stays this cold. 1 or 2 degrees of warming, and the whole trick starts to fail. The oversized heart cannot pump warmer, oxygen-poor blood fast enough. The skin cannot absorb enough. The body starts to suffocate in water that other fish would find refreshing. It drowns in the exact same ocean, at a temperature that would be a gift to almost any other animal. A creature that gave up on red blood and got away with it is a creature standing on a very thin edge. And this is where the story starts to feel less like a nature documentary and more like a warning. Because there are more than a dozen species of ice fish in the Southern Ocean, and every single one of them made the same trade. They are not experiments that survived. They are a whole family that bet everything on the ocean staying cold. Millions of years of evolution walk them out onto the same narrow branch, 1 degree at a time, and they cannot walk back. Picture that for a second. An entire lineage of vertebrates, thriving, healthy, everywhere in Antarctic waters, and every single one of them holding on to a survival strategy that only works if the temperature does not change. This is the part of the story people miss when they hear, the ocean is warming. It is not just that certain species will move north. It is that certain species cannot move at all. They were built here. They were built for here. And the world they were built for is quietly shifting under them. Now let your eyes drop to the seafloor. Something is walking across the mud, and it takes you a moment to realize what you are seeing. It has 8 legs, long, thin, spindly legs. Its body is barely a knot at the center. The whole animal is the size of a dinner plate. A sea spider in the genus colorless, moving in slow motion across cold sand. It does not scurry. It does not react. It moves the way a shadow moves when a cloud drifts across the sun. Sea spiders exist in warmer oceans too. They are usually tiny, a fingernail, a grain of rice with legs. In warm water, that is normal. You could hold 100 of them in one hand and barely feel the weight. But down here, in the freezing dark around Antarctica, they get huge. Leg spans up to 70 centimeters. That is roughly the width of a car tire, on legs the thickness of a pencil, walking across mud that has not been warm in millions of years. Deep-sea isopods swell into things the size of a house cat. Certain worms stretch out into strange, oversized ribbons. Even the local jellyfish get larger, softer, stranger. Scientists have a name for the pattern: polar gigantism. And there is more than one theory for why it happens. The one that fits the emotional core of the story is this: cold slows everything down. Every chemical reaction inside a body runs slower in the cold. Muscles fire slower. Digestion takes longer. Cells divide more slowly. Growth stretches out. And oxygen, remember, is abundant. So animals down here can afford to grow larger over long lifetimes without hitting the metabolic ceiling that would stop a warm water animal from doing the same thing. Growth is not chased, it is inherited by patience. The giants down here are not powerful, they are patient. Think about how long that took to build. Some Antarctic sea spiders may have been walking that same seafloor for decades. Some deep-sea sponges nearby may be older than any building in your city. Certain glass sponges in cold, quiet water are thought to live for hundreds of years, in some cases far longer. Research suggests some Antarctic sponges may be among the oldest animals on the planet. Time is the only currency that matters down here, which means recovery is nearly impossible. Break something in this world, a population, a reef, a slow-growing seabed community, and the repair time is measured not in seasons but in human lifetimes, sometimes longer. Sometimes you break it, and nobody alive when it broke will be alive when it comes back. That is not a metaphor. That is the arithmetic of these animals. Which brings us to the strangest part of this world so far, the place all this life is anchored to. Look up, not toward the ocean surface, toward the ceiling above your head, because down here the ceiling is not empty. It is not just ice. On the underside of the sea ice around Antarctica, there is a forest. Not trees, algae, diatoms and other single-celled plants growing in a thin brown film clinging to the bottom of the frozen roof. Enough sunlight leaks through the ice in the right season for these algae to photosynthesize, and that thin brown film is a meadow. You have to hold that image for a second. A meadow, on the ceiling, growing in the last thin sunlight that made it through meters of ice, in a world where nothing should be growing at all. And it is not decorative. This is where the food chain starts. Grazing that meadow are the animals that hold the entire Southern Ocean together. Krill, small translucent crustaceans, each one about the length of a paperclip. They cling to the underside of the ice like inverted cattle, scraping algae off with tiny legs. Imagine grazing upside down on a sky made of ice. That is what these animals do for a living, and it is the base of almost everything that eats in these waters. Remember the krill? They come back. They are more important than they look. And when they come back, the meaning of everything above them is going to change. There is something worth pausing on here. The reason the largest animals on Earth show up in the coldest waters on Earth is not because they enjoy the cold. It is because this is where the food is. And the reason the food is here is because there is ice. And the reason there is ice is because it is cold. Every strange step in the story loops back to the same simple fact. The cold is the beginning of everything. Take it out, and the entire structure has nothing to stand on. Because here is what is hanging from that ceiling. The blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed on this planet, comes here to feed. Fin whales, humpbacks, minkies, Craybeater seals, whose teeth are shaped to filter krill directly, as if evolution built a strainer where a mouth should be. Adelie and emperor penguins, squid, fish, seabirds so far from land they look impossible. Almost every visible predator in the Antarctic ecosystem is 1, 2, or 3 steps away from something that scrapes algae off the bottom of ice. And that ice depends on the season. It depends on freezing being reliable. It depends on the same cold machine we started with. Without that sealing, the biggest animals on Earth starve. Now watch what happens near the edge of a piece of sea ice. The camera catches something narrow and pale reaching down from the underside of the ice. Not a fish, not a rope. A thin, hollow tube of ice growing downward through the water toward the seafloor. It looks alive, the way a slow-moving vine looks alive. Around it, sea stars and sea urchins go on with their business, oblivious, until the tip of the tube touches the mud, and everything it touches begins to freeze in place. This is called a brinacle, and it is not CGI. It is not a special effect. It is a real, filmed phenomenon that was captured for the first time by BBC cameras beneath Antarctic sea ice. Here is how it works. When seawater freezes into sea ice, the salt does not freeze with it. Salt gets rejected. It drips out of the forming ice in a super cold, super salty brine, so cold that it sits well below the freezing point of ordinary seawater. That brine is heavier than the water around it, so it sinks in a narrow stream. But it is so cold that as it sinks it freezes the seawater it touches from the inside out, building a hollow ice tube around itself. The tube grows downward, and whatever unlucky animal is sitting at the bottom, in the wrong spot, gets frozen alive. The cold is not just where these animals live. Sometimes it hunts them. Take a second with that. In this ocean, water itself has learned how to be a predator. There is no bite, no chase, no teeth. Just a slow finger of ice descending in silence, and a sea star that will never move again. If you had to design the most alien predator possible, you probably would not come up with a hollow tube of ice growing downward and freezing the ground where it lands. But the Antarctic Ocean got there first, without designing anything. Physics and chemistry did the rest. And this is a good place to say something about the whole world we are looking at. Nothing down here is trying to be strange. Everything down here is trying to survive. The strangeness is just what survival looks like when the conditions are extreme enough. That is the frame that changes as this video goes on. It is why the icefish is not a monster. It is why the sea spider is not a curiosity. It is why the brinacle is not evil. They are all the shape survival takes when the water is this cold. Now leave the underside of the ice and drop back to the abyss, thousands of meters down. Because there is something down here that most people do not know exists at all. Somewhere on the deep ocean floor, in certain places where salty groundwater or ancient buried salt deposits leak out from below, the seawater above them turns into something impossible, a pool of water so dense with salt that it does not mix with the water above it. It just pools. It has a surface. It has waves. It has a shoreline. There is a lake. At the bottom of the sea. Read that sentence again. Because it is not a metaphor. Submersibles have descended to these places and filmed them. The lake sits in a bowl in the seafloor, sometimes rimmed with beds of mussels. Its surface ripples when a submarine drives over it. Its water is so different from the ocean above that fish which fall into it die instantly, pickled by salt so extreme their bodies cannot function. The most famous of these are in the Gulf of Mexico, but similar chemistry, cold seeps, brine pools, and the strange ecosystems they support, has been documented across the deep ocean floor, including in cold Southern Ocean waters. And here is the twist. This should be one of the most sterile places on Earth. Toxic chemistry, no sunlight, salt so high it kills on contact, and yet, on the edges of these pools, life piles up. Mussels the size of your palm, tube worms, bacteria that do not use sunlight to make food. Instead, they use chemicals, methane, hydrogen sulfide, bubbling up from below. Chemosynthesis, life running on the ocean's own poison. Life did not just adapt to the cold, it built entirely new worlds inside it. Cold, dark, salty, toxic, and full. Think about what this means for a moment. Every biology class you have ever taken probably started with the sun. Sunlight hits plants. Plants make sugar. Everything else eats the plants or eats the things that eat the plants. That is the story of life on Earth. But in these pools, in the dark, on the bottom of the freezing sea, life has quietly rewritten that story. It runs on chemistry instead of sunlight. It does not need a star. It only needs the right leak and the right kind of cold and enough time. That is not just biology. That is a different definition of what life needs to exist. And it changes what we look for when we ask whether life might exist on moons like Europa or Enceladus, where the surface is frozen and the ocean is dark. The cold at the bottom of our own ocean is already showing us the answer. Life does not need the sun. It only needs an edge to live on. Now you have to zoom out one more time, because the cold has one more scene to show you, and it is the one that makes this whole story stop being a documentary about strange animals and start being a documentary about the entire planet. Look up into the black water above the seafloor, and then imagine sinking through it the body of a whale. Whales die. They usually die far from land. If the body does not get eaten by orcas or sharks at the surface or wash ashore, it fills with water and sinks. It falls slowly into darkness, sometimes for miles, until it lands on the freezing mud at the bottom of the sea. And there, something remarkable happens. Think about what that food had to travel through to arrive. Hundreds of tons of protein and blubber, falling out of the sunlit world into a place where snow-like flakes of dead plankton are usually the only food that ever arrives. A whale fall is the biggest meal the abyss ever sees, and it is not eaten in a day, it is eaten across decades. First come the mobile scavengers, hagfish, sleeper sharks, amphipods swarming the carcass in clouds so thick they turn the water grey. In months they strip most of the soft tissue away. Then the enrichment stage begins. Worms, snails and crustaceans move in to work through the bones, the skin, the remaining scraps. This phase can last years. Then, the sulfophilic stage. Bacteria colonize the bones themselves, breaking down the fats trapped inside, producing hydrogen sulfide. And that sulfide, in the perpetual dark of the cold seafloor, becomes food for a new community. Some of the same chemosynthetic species you would find at a hydrothermal vent, thousands of kilometers away, colonize a single whale skeleton and thrive there for decades. In the coldest darkness, a corpse is a miracle. There is a name for these skeletons. They are called whale falls. Scientists estimate a single one can support a specialized ecosystem for 30 to 50 years, sometimes longer. A single dead whale, feeding a small city of animals for as long as many human lives. And industrial whaling, over the course of the 20th century, reduced the number of great whales in the ocean so dramatically that scientists have started to ask a question that sounds ridiculous when you first hear it. Are there entire deep-sea species that are struggling because there are not enough whales dying? Species whose ancestors evolved to specialize on whale bones, worms in the genus Ossidax, for example, that eat directly into the fat locked inside whale skeletons. Some evidence suggests yes. The abyss depended on funerals. We reduced the number of funerals, and the abyss noticed. That is one of the strangest sentences you will hear in a marine biology story. A human industry up at the surface reached down into a world it never touched and changed the diet of animals it never even saw. Now come back to that thing we set aside at the very beginning, the name that sounded like a filing category, Antarctic bottom water. Sit with what it actually does. The cold water forming around Antarctica does not just sit there, it sinks, and once it sinks, it flows, slowly, along the seafloor, north, under the Atlantic, under the Pacific, under the Indian Ocean. It feeds the deep basins of every major ocean on the planet. Scientists estimate the water at the bottom of the sea, in some regions may not touch the surface again for roughly 1,000 years. It is deep-time water. It is water that was last at the surface when medieval kings still ruled Europe. When it sinks now, some of it will not see sunlight again until civilizations we cannot imagine are running the world. That coldest layer we started with, this is what it does. It is not a temperature, it is not a curiosity. It is one of the main pumps of the entire global ocean. Together with cold water sinking in the North Atlantic, it drives the deep, slow, overturning circulation that carries oxygen, nutrients, and heat around the planet. The freezer at the bottom of the world is also its heart, and it beats slowly. So slowly that most humans go their whole lives without knowing it is happening at all. But every breath a fish takes at the bottom of the Pacific, thousands of kilometers from Antarctica, is being taken in water that Antarctic ice helped deliver. That is not poetry. That is the plumbing of the planet. And now the callback finally lands. Remember the krill? The paperclip-sized crustaceans scraping algae off the underside of the ice? Their biomass in the Southern Ocean is enormous. Scientists estimate the total mass of Antarctic krill in the hundreds of millions of tons, roughly comparable to the total weight of humans on Earth. Sonar systems have picked up krill swarms so dense they look like a false seafloor. A ghost bottom, hundreds of meters above the real one. That entire cold empire, the whales, the seals, the penguins, the seabirds, the fish, the squid, runs on this one animal. The biggest animals in Antarctic waters exist because of something the size of a paperclip. Pull this thread, and everything above it falls. Krill depend on the algae. The algae depend on the ice. The ice depends on the cold. The cold depends on the machine that pumps freezing water down into the deep and pulls oxygen with it. And that machine depends on freezing continuing to work at the Antarctic surface, year after year, with reliable timing. Which is where the story stops being impressive and starts getting uncomfortable. Remember the antifreeze from earlier? The proteins that stop ice from tearing apart the blood of Antarctic fish? That is now the problem. Those proteins were built by evolution over tens of millions of years in an ocean that was staying cold and getting colder. The fish that carry them have no reverse gear. They cannot slowly retune their enzymes to run in warmer water in the space of a few decades. Research suggests notothenoid fish, including the icefish, have very narrow thermal tolerances. Some species may only tolerate a few degrees of warming before their physiology begins to fail. Warm the water, and they cannot follow it. Warm the water, and they cannot leave it. Warm the water, and they cannot stay in it. The cold did not make them survivors. It made them prisoners. And this is the shift the video has been building toward. The animals that look most alien down here, clear blood, giant hearts, antifreeze veins, slow-motion bodies, ice-fed food chains, are not tough. They are specialized, and specialization in a changing ocean is not strength. It is a countdown. They cannot go anywhere else. They were built for one temperature, and they were built for one ocean. An ocean that has, for most of their evolutionary history, held that temperature in place. Now come back to where you started. The descent, the last daylight above your head, the pale shape drifting past your shoulder, the temperature reading of minus 1.9 degrees Celsius. Feel it again. But now, feel everything you have learned. Above you, the ice ceiling is not empty. There is a meadow on it. Krill are grazing on that meadow right now, scraping algae off a sky that is freezing above their heads. That is where the food chain starts. Below you, on the seafloor, a whale that died months or years ago is still feeding a hidden city. Hagfish, worms, bacteria, mussels and animals with names most people will never hear are living inside the ribs of a corpse the size of a bus. That is where death is turned back into life. Beside you, the icefish drifts. Its clear blood carries oxygen through wide vessels and an oversized heart at a pace that only makes sense in this exact temperature. It cannot survive anywhere else. It cannot survive if this place changes. And this place is changing. Under all of that, the coldest water on Earth is quietly rolling off the continental shelf and sinking. It will spread along the seafloor for 1,000 years, carrying oxygen into basins that would otherwise suffocate. It is doing this now. It has been doing it for as long as there has been an Antarctica. It is the reason the deep ocean everywhere on the planet is not dead. The coldest place in the ocean is not a place of absence. It is not a graveyard. It is not empty. It is the reason the rest of the ocean is full. That is the real answer to the question this video began with. What exists in the coldest place in the ocean? Not just monsters, not just strange bodies, not just alien chemistry, something more useful and more fragile than any of that. A machine, a meadow, a funeral that feeds decades, a body that gave up red blood and got away with it because the cold allowed it, and a warning, because the cold that made all of this possible is quietly beginning to slip. And when the coldest place in the ocean gets warmer, the parts of the planet that depend on it, which is nearly all of it, will begin to notice. Slowly, then not slowly. The pale shape drifts past your shoulder one more time. It does not know you are there. It does not know anything about what is happening far above it. It is just an animal, doing what its ancestors have done for millions of years, in the only water it can survive in, the coldest place in the ocean, not empty,